Welcome to the Business of Music. I'm Jan Hall from Folk Roots Radio.
And I'm Gary Glass from Quantum Sound Productions.
The Business of Music is a new video and audio podcast dedicated to helping independent musicians navigate a rapidly changing business environment.
And you can subscribe to us on YouTube, ring the bell for notifications, and the podcast goes out on SoundCloud, and iTunes, and wherever podcasts are downloadable.
Coming up tonight, we have an episode of the show that's focused around recording. We're going to be joined by two wonderful Essex County musicians, Dale Butler and Karen Morand. We're going to talk about the recording they've done over the years. And when you see Dale Butler's collection of CDs later in this show, you realize he's recorded a whole bunch of different albums, a whole bunch of different ways. So we're going to be great to talk to him. And Karen Morand is certainly no slouch as far as recording is concerned. She has worked with her own band, BOSCO. She has recorded a solo album, and she's now also working with Manitoba Hal on Even the Bird Was Free. So we're going to have a great discussion about recording tonight. So we're pleased to welcome to the Business of Music tonight Dale Butler and Karen Morand. Now, Gary and I, we know these people pretty well.
A little bit.
Yeah. Karen Morand, we're going to start with you. We should probably start with ladies first. Apologize to Dale. You've been making music for quite a while now, haven't you?
Yeah, about 10 years, full time.
Yeah, and that's all you want to tell us.
I was just messing around a lot before that.
Yeah, so tell us how you got started in music.
Well, I mean, I've always done music, probably like Dale, and I grew up singing and playing in the church, and just I've always, sang with. I have a very musical family, and took up piano, and then I came to Windsor from the Toronto area when I was about 28 to study the music therapy program, and that's where I learned to play guitar. And then after that, I picked up writing, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
And I think now you have 3 albums with your band, BOSCO.
Yes.
You also have a solo album, right? The most recent one.
That's right.
Every Ray of Light.
Every Flash of Light.
Every Flash of Light. I got Every Flash of Light.
Yeah. I like that one, though. We'll
That's the title for the next one. And then you're also working with Manitoba Hal on Even the Bird Was Free. I know this because we actually have had some fun interviews over the last year or so talking about your music.
We have, yes. Yeah.
So you've worked in a lot of different ways so far.
Yes, yeah. And I'm very big on, I'm becoming more and more a fan of collaborations. So it can take you different places where you don't expect to go. So
we'll look forward to digging into that tonight. Dale Butler, what can we say about the Dale? Apparently, it's nearly 50 years that he has been making music.
Yes.
That is extraordinary, Dale.
Well, it's been a wonderful life so far. I'll be 63 this year, and I started performing out when I was 13. And the very first gig was playing as an opener for my brother's band at my grade 8 graduation. So that's how it all started. And, of course, I was in a musical family also. My mother was a piano player. My father played the Hawaiian lap steel, and then my brother became a guitarist as we found a guitar at my grandmother's house here in Kingsville. And the guitar kind of was the attraction for me. As soon as I heard an acoustic guitar, that was it. I was on my way. And I've been writing songs. I started in the 70s writing songs, and that's where I've stayed as a singer-songwriter.
And you have so much fun doing it.
Oh, do I? Yes.
We should mention that actually Dale's in the midst of, I don't know if we do, is this a legacy project or re-recording songs from over the years? I mean, the Songwriter's Journey albums, I think there are now 3 of those, aren't there?
There are 3 of them right now, and I'm slating the songs for number 4. So it's basically I'm archiving and going back and re-recording songs that I haven't played for quite a few years. And along the way, I'm still writing new ones. So I'm mixing them all together and putting out a collection of CDs that will be basically chronicling my songwriting.
Yeah. And I get the dubious honor of mixing those.
Yes.
And it's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun.
Dale's not very picky, though, I have to admit.
Well, it's a formula. We've worked out a formula. The
yeah.
sound we like, and it's kind of cookie cutter, because my music is acoustic generated, and so it has a sound and a tone.
Well, everybody has a specific sound, and you know what yours is.
Yep.
You like it a certain way, and that's great. Makes it a little bit easier, actually.
Yeah. So thank you for your mixing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pleasure.
So let's dig into recording. 60 years between you, 50 for Dale, 10 for Karen. You've got a bit of catching up to do there.
I know. I don't know if I'll ever catch up to Dale.
Yes.
And I think over the years you must have worked in a lot of different ways, you know, from the point of view of recording. And I think one of the things that has become quite noticeable in the way that the music industry has changed, you know, we talk a lot about how streaming is basically upending everything. But even recording, I was talking to a couple of young lads just a few months ago and asking them about their EP, which sounded great. And I said, oh yeah, which studio did you use to record this? And they said, oh yeah, we recorded it in our bathroom.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Had perfect acoustics. And, you know, with the way that technology has changed and the ability to be able to record in your own space, it really has shaken things up. But it wasn't always like that. And I think when you started out, Dale,
when I started out,
you would definitely be going to a studio.
we went to a studio. My very first recording was in 1972. I was 16 years old, and I was asked to play acoustic and electric guitar on a gospel album. And we went to Detroit into a beautiful old studio. I'm trying to remember the name of it right now. I have the... should I show you something right now?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Dale is this is very much a show and tell episode of Business and Music.
This is an 8-track tape, and I'm on an 8-track, which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
And that was that album?
That was the album that we recorded in Detroit when I was 16, and it was a lot of fun. Artie Field's studio in Detroit, and I'll never forget it because my mother was a bit worried about us going to Detroit because of the riots that had gone on previously, and she worried. And when we drove up to the studio, we had to honk the horn, and a big door opened up, and an armed guard came out to see who we were, and then he said, "Are you the gospel boys?" And we said yes. He said, "Well, come on in." And we drove into the garage, and then they shut the door. But he was armed, and I think I know why. They had some really nice microphones in that studio that a lot of people would like to have today. So that was my first experience in a studio, and I was very young, but it was just the greatest experience ever. I'll never forget it. And it started something that I just can't stop. So that was my first.
So over the years, you must have recorded in quite a few different studios.
Quite a few different studios. From that, I think my next one would have been 1985 in Windsor at Polaris Recording Studio on Droulard Road, which is still there today. And that was, I can show you.
I just so happened to have.
I did a 45, which is a record with a large hole in the middle.
A small record with a large hole.
With a large hole to play on a jukebox. You know, the fascinating thing about 45s is when it's the fact that we do a show and tell about them. I mean, 8-track, I could understand it because maybe people hadn't seen an 8-track if you weren't around to appreciate it the first time around. But it does make me laugh when we talk about 45s. But in those days, I mean, it was, you would record and then you would probably have a deal that provided the album at the end of it. I mean, because the studio was handling all that, right? None of these days where you actually, suddenly have to find out who's going to be, burning your CDs and packaging up your product.
Yeah, this was a real fun experience. When we went into the studio in Windsor, I had a band already. My brother had a band, and so I used all of his players, and we rehearsed ahead of time, went in, and started recording at about 3 a.m, and we just had a great time. And we had horn players on this, ended up with, I think, trombones and saxophones and trumpets, and we had singers from the University of Windsor who were studying music, and they came and they were our backup singers, and we had 16 voices, and we did 32 tracks on the one, which was just, we were having too much fun. And then the other one I think was probably about 16 tracks or something like that. But
And how long did it take to do that? I mean,
it took a while to do it all, but we were layering everything and adding, parts and doubling and tripling, and it was just a lot of fun. Yeah. And I have since gone much simpler than this style, but I'm glad I got to do it.
So sorry.
Yeah, I was saying you actually recorded in this studio space, I think.
Yes.
On various projects.
Yes.
This used to be a recording studio, audio only, and since then it's transformed into mostly a video studio. But I know at one time it was a busy place.
Yes, it was hopping here. I did a lot of session work here too, playing guitar, and we did TV commercials and like soundtrack radio commercials as well back in the day with Stu Campbell and Bill Loop and a bunch of guys. We've had a lot of fun recording, period. I just love it.
So you went through a whole bunch of different studio experiences. We're going to hold off discussing more where you're at just now, because I know you've become a lot more independent. And let's bring Karen in on the conversation, because you probably have actually seen a lot of the change just in your 10 years that you've now been, making your own music. Because I imagine when your first album, I mean, you would definitely be going into a studio and working with people. And I think pretty much you have every time, haven't you?
Yeah. Now, my first recording was was with actually my brother. And my brother is in Hamilton, and he had a studio much like this in his home. And it was just kind of to make an album for family and friends, because I had just started to write. And but he kind of had a bit of a he was somewhat professional, and he has a Juno.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's nice.
Yes, he does, for production. Anyway, nice. That's another story. So so that was kind of a professional deal, and but it took him 5 years to do it, because I got the family and friends discount, so to speak. So
pushed to the back of the line.
That's right. But there was no hurry, and I learned so much because he was very patient, and he helped me finish the songs that I'd started, and he taught me a lot about just the recording process and the layering and all that. So when we ended up back here in Windsor, actually I've just done a series of recordings in people's homes. They've all been home studio situations, and just kind of made my way around. My last one was in St. Thomas with
Denny
Gautier,
yeah.
And his is also in his isn't in the basement, it's on the top floor. So we're moving up in the world.
That was the Every Flash of Light album,
That's
which is
right.
the latest one.
Which is the latest one, yeah.
The three before that, I didn't even realize, this is fascinating, I think, because, spend so much time in the music business, you kind of assume that what you've got when when everything comes packaged up and everything, that you assume that you're getting something. I just assumed that your first albums were recorded in studios rather than actually in something that maybe slightly smaller and more I don't know if I can say ad hoc or something like that.
And I think especially the past 10 years, that's the direction people had already started taking. Was home recording, because software became accessible, recording software, and it's a lot of DIY, and so I think I just kind of got in on that. And it also, I think, out of necessity in Windsor, there's not a lot of studios left, so there weren't a lot of options. And I went with people that I knew, friends of friends. So.
We should mention that people like Denny Gautier, I mean, is trying to build a name, as a producer, and obviously a very talented
He's a great
musician,
guitarist.
Songwriter in his own right. Yeah,
he's played guitar when we did the session with Sarah Smith.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, very great guitarist. And Dale, the interesting thing about your songwriters series, I think when the Volume 1, which came out 3 years ago,
yes,
that you actually went and recorded with John Law in Wheatley.
In Wheatley, yes.
But since then, you've decided to actually go back to home recording.
Yep.
Which is a fascinating change.
Well, Gary and I, we got talking a little bit about what's available, and we found a new machine, and it's called the, I forget the name of it right now.
Zoom L12.
The Zoom L12.
Which is sitting right here.
There. There's one right over there. And it's a really interesting machine, and I'm quite frightened of all the knobs and the buttons.
Was scared.
I was scared. I was ready to hand it back in the first day, but Gary came up with a simple way that I could operate it and just keep it as simple as possible and do all my tracks, and then I give it to him on a SD card, and then he loads it up into his machine, and then he takes care of the final mix, and I sit with him and we discuss it. And
Dale's gotten very good at it, actually.
yeah, I've got her figured out, and it's really fun because I can record at my leisure whenever I want to do it, and into the night. I just love it. It's a wonderful thing.
And Judy doesn't even hear you.
She doesn't even hear me. I'm in the basement, far corner of the house, and it's. I even put a towel under the door so that there's no air coming in, because I can hear the sometimes the fans going on the furnace, and I can hear that hiss. So I put towels down to stop that. And it's working out really nice. I'm having a great time, and I've gone like from the big old 2-inch reels, and I've gone to worked on ADAT. I recorded on every format there is. The only thing that I'm hoping to do someday is record a 78 record. That's my goal. I've been on every format except for the 78 record. So.
Well, we did talk about a piano roll as well.
Yeah, that's. Yeah. We'll have to work
I can't even remember. I didn't even know if I said that. But what did on the cylinders?
Yeah, we'll work on that down the road. But, it's great fun. So home recording has really changed a lot, and with these self-contained units, it's just beautiful. It's one little box and away you go.
And the software like Pro Tools and. Audacity, Reaper, they're all so accessible, and
yes.
Pro Tools isn't exactly cheap, but Reaper is like $60 for a lifetime license. So it's become very accessible.
Yeah, and I really didn't want to go with the computer because of my computer skills just aren't up to snuff. Like the young kids can do the computers really well. I found that this was better for me because it's just one little box and it has everything in there. So it's really good.
My major concern over the years, and certainly with the amount of music I get sent, and for the radio, I mean, I get sent an insane amount of music now, mainly because it's, hey, we can all record at home in our bathrooms, the bedrooms, under the chair in the kitchen, is that, it's become a whole lot easier to do. My biggest challenge is making sure that the music I get sent is actually ready for airplay, because I think that's really important to make sure that the music is mixed well and mastered. And
very important.
I guess particularly in your situation, when you went from an album that was produced by John Law, who's certainly no slouch as a producer, but then doing it yourself, you had to make sure that you had a sound that still fit well with what you were doing. And I think, Gary, you were saying that before. I mean, Dale has a sound and it's trying to capture that.
And he knows what he wants, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Because some people don't. They don't know how they want to sound. Dale has a very, I don't want to call it simple, but a very easy live sound.
It's
and he doesn't like a lot
acoustic.
of embellishment and effects and things like that. So that's like very easy to mix.
Yeah, I want it to sound basically like I'm sitting in your living room singing to you. I want that just a warm room sound, basically. And it's like I'm sitting with you right now playing. That's it. That's who I am.
What about when you've recorded over the years? I mean, do you leave that up to the people you work with? I imagine when you're working with someone like Denny, who I know, played some of the instruments that went on to the Every Flash of Light album. Do you tend to leave that up to the people that you're working with, or do you tend to feel I have to take control? I mean, you probably have the sound thing, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think as I've gone with every album, I've kind of become more confident and kind of understood more of what sound I wanted. And I think I've moved, I'm with you, Dale. I want it to be warm and dry, not a lot of auto tune, or it's a matter of preference. I mean, some artists like tons of that stuff, and that's okay. But like Gary said, as long as that's what you want. So I think as I've gone along, I've had to gain the confidence to know, to be able to say what I want. Denny was actually the first person who was willing to produce. All the other people, they didn't want to produce it. So that means like making a lot of the decisions about the direction. So it was really a stab in the dark because the guys are like, I'm the guy pressing the button. You
do your thing, I'll do mine.
Right.
And
so I've kind of been, a very reluctant producer. But finally the fourth project, I actually found someone who was willing to take things in a different direction as far as arrangement. But I knew what I wanted and what I didn't. So if he came to me with something completely off the wall, which he did, sometimes I would go, no, hate it. And sometimes I would go, oh, like he would surprise me. And so I think I've just, as I've gone along, I've become more confident in knowing what I want. And my sound keeps changing and evolving, because we change as people and we mature and get wiser and more comfortable in our skin.
New things, and sometimes you hear a recording and you go, wow, I really like the way that sounds. I want to try that. And
that's a good point, Gary, because I used that tool when I went into the studio with Denny. I heard a recording of somebody and I loved the sound of the whole album, and I said, I want to sound like that. Or, actually sent him a number of recordings of just that kind of the sound I was going for, the feel I was going for. That's really useful for the guy who's pressing the buttons, because then he has an idea. Even if you can't articulate in so many words, you can give them a sample.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you've also recorded with Manitoba Hal, wonderful ukulele bluesman. Now, when you recorded That's Even the Bird Was Free, which is the new duo who I know you've played gigs together before, but I think actually we'll probably talk about this a little later. This year, maybe the first year when you actually go out as Even the Bird Was Free. When you worked with Hal, was that a different way of working?
Oh, completely. Now he's more, he's a very DIY guy, so he's recorded some of his own albums, his solo albums, with a similar unit to what Gary has, the Zoom. And he's kind of learned as he went along the way. And then I think he has someone do some mixing and mastering for him. But so we just had this little unit, and he had it set up in the living room, and we recorded from that. And then he mixed and mastered it himself. He mixed it and then he had someone master it. He just used some basic computer software that he had. So it was a different experience because he's a different personality. He likes to keep it organic and real, and but he also had a lot of recording knowledge, so that was useful because I'm a nerd, but I'm not that nerdy. I wish I was. Yeah.
So I just wonder, when you've had all these experiences, how it changes the way you look towards the future of your recording. I mean, Every Flash of Light came out last year. I think I heard that you're already thinking about the next project.
Yeah, it does that. I think, right, Dale, you're always when you're in the middle of it, you're already starting to write and think about now next time. And because a recording project usually takes a while, creatively, I feel kind of done with the songs in a sense. I
spend so much of my time saying to people, yeah. Just because you made the album, it's not done. You have to get out there and promote the album. The number of times I interview people and they want to tell me about the new stuff. I say, yeah, but we're here to talk about this one, which is the one you just finished a few weeks ago.
It is a fine balance, right? So you have to, you have to remember you are creating music for other people, and so you have to remember this is their first time hearing it and treat it as such. Yeah. But you also have to, water and feed your inner creative or the muse. And so I try and kind of keep both in tension. But you do have to remember that, you are making music for others. So as I was making that project, I think, it definitely gave me ideas for what I would do next time, what I wouldn't do. I would like to have BOSCO back.
Which is your band?
Which is my band.
Aaron Verhulst.
And Benny Santoro. Yeah, and we do kind of an acoustic thing. And I would like to do live off the floor again, which we had done prior to that project, which is fun. And it's a little messier. And not every recording studio cares to do that. And so you have to find just the right studio that is willing to do that kind of project. But I think above all, I'm just getting braver and more confident to say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. And so stay tuned. Yeah. It'll be different.
It'll be different. That's good.
It'll be fun, right?
Exactly.
So as independent artists, you guys, you have to fund yourself in your recordings and your CDs.
Yep.
And Dale, you make some decent money at doing your gigs and things, so that's essentially the way you fund yourself, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah. And the CD sales, what I do with that is I just put it in a pot and it's ready for the next one so that I can produce the next. Now the recording costs are down because I have my own little machine. I've bought a few microphones and all the things that are necessary, but the actual only cost now is the, getting the artwork done and then pressing the record. That's it. That's all it costs. And then you start selling them again. And the CD sales, we could talk about that for just a minute. CD sales are dropping off. It's not what it used to be. And I accept that now. I'm okay with it.
Because we're all going to go back to 8 tracks.
Yeah, we just made
cassettes are making a comeback.
Cassettes are making a comeback. Yeah. The mixtape are coming back.
Yeah.
But I'm just at my age. I'm just archiving, like we talked about, and just having fun with it. That's what it's all about for me. I'm not making a living at this. I'm retired, and this is just something that I've done my whole life, and I'm going to just keep doing it because I love it. Yeah.
I think it's good to remember that for independent artists, for the most part, your recording, your CD is an expensive business card. And so I think of it that way. That's someone told me that a long time ago, and so I treat it as such. So there are times when I just give it to somebody because I just want them to have my music in their hand. But also it's just a way to get people to hear you. And then, it turns into people coming out to shows or buying your music online.
Yeah, it depends on where your priority is. Is the CD your priority? Is your live show the priority? And with the way CD sales are and everything, it seems like performing live is where most independents are making their money, forging relationships with their audience, and then hopefully they buy some CDs or they stream their music or something like that. But and if you've gotten into the grant situation, so you've gotten a factor grant at one point.
Yes, I did.
Did you apply for it yourself, or did you have somebody do it for you? Or
I applied for that myself. It was a fairly simple grant. It was a grant. It was a showcasing grant. So it was something where I went on a trip, and it was showcasing Canadian music. So it paid for most of my trip to go there. That kind of a grant is fairly simple. A recording grant is a lot more involved because of all the layers, all the players, and all of the different expenses. Also, depending on the factor, love you factor, but they don't make it easy for you. It's complicated. I find their website complicated, and the grant applying process is complicated. But I think in part that's engineered into the process because they don't want free money isn't free.
But I think that does create a problem, though. I mean, Gary basically alluded to the fact that if you find people who are used to writing grants, or if you're from a label or another company that is coming forward to write grants on behalf of their artists, or it's a company that is the artist, and you get good at it, you can do very well. And sometimes it does feel like it's not really a level playing field for people who are trying to get started. Is that a fair thing to say?
I can see your point. I do, but I think you just have to look at it, you have to decide where you're going to put your money. And so I think investing in a grant writer can be a good idea. So, it can be just a built-in cost. I don't know. I think it's just the price of being an independent artist or that's just the way it goes. So you have to decide, you find a person who's good at writing grants and that is successful at writing grants. And, if you find if you decide your time is money, then you hire them to do that for a cut, and, it's peace of mind. So I have considered it. It's not off the table for me to pay someone but it's just so I can spend my time, writing songs and playing.
And perform.
The business side of the getting it done sometimes takes a little too much effort. And it's, same with social media and things like that.
Yeah.
Which can, some people enjoy it and some people just loathe it, and it's just something you have to do if you want to be in the industry. I mean, you don't have to, I guess, but then it reduces your potential audience and your ability to reach people.
There's a tipping point, I think, for all of these things. So for social media, for grant writing, for any of the business end of things, because I guess that's what we're talking about. There is a tipping point, I think. It does depend on what you love to do as well. But there's a tipping point where when the time you're spending on the business of the thing is way outweighing the time that you're spending creating or just doing the thing, you have to decide, okay, something's got to give.
Enough of
It's kind of like, when you're working, maybe when a mom starts working full time and is not finding the time to clean the house, she's going to invest a little bit of money in paying a cleaning person. And so I think it's kind of that same kind of thing, unless it's very therapeutic to vacuum, that's okay too. But I think you have to find it there. I think there's a tipping point for people that, they find if it's sucking all of your creative energy and or just your time, you have to decide, whether you're going to invest in paying someone to help you out, whether it's, people can help you out with social media, management, booking.
There's many routes that you can travel in this industry for sure.
So I suspect that's kind of a balance that you have to try and pick all the time, in relation to your own career. I know you've worked with people closely that have given you support in, a sort of quasi-management type scenario. But you pretty much manage everything yourself, don't you?
I do. So I had hired a manager before, and it was really because, I needed the help and I was new to the industry, so I wanted to fast track. And she was wonderful. She really, gave me a lot of tools. And once she kind of worked herself out of a job, I just took it from there. And actually, my husband helps manage me now, so...
And he writes songs with you now too.
And now he writes songs
Charlie Morand.
with me too. So it is a constant, it is a constant, a balancing act. And, I've talked to publicists. I've kind of, courted that. But again, it's, that's, you have to weigh out, is that money investment worth, the return that you are hoping to get? And there's booking agents. There's all that kind of stuff. So for now, I'm still at that level, I think, in my career where it's manageable. But, hopefully there will come a time when I'm going to have to hire someone like Dale Butler to help me record some demos.
It's interesting when you talk about the album becoming the business card now, because on a previous episode of the show, when we, which you can check out if you go to YouTube or SoundCloud, when we had Mary Newland and Richard Baker with us, and, they were in LA for 30 years. Richard played with Gina Vanelli, Santana, Gary Wright, Leo Sayer. Mary has sung backup for the Beach Boys. in those days, I always felt it was like art that was being created. And, it's interesting because we had show and tell with Dale today, but I know when Richard was here, he brought, gold discs that, he'd been part of.
That's beautiful.
And I don't know, sometimes something bothers me. Maybe it's because of what I do now, doing radio, but I still think of it as art. And, and I guess I get concerned when, the idea as well, this is going to get me some more gigs if I put a new album out. Obviously, you still think of it as art when you make it, but do you ever feel like you're almost like a little hamster in a wheel, have to keep everything going?
Definitely. No, definitely. But it is still art. And I think when I feel it the most, and Dale, you'll probably, resonate with this, is when you are playing live, playing with people that you know and you like, and for people that you're really connecting with. And then it's just great, creative loop that happens, and it's all makes it all worthwhile, kind of thing. But that feels truly creative because you're co-creating with the audience and with
very important.
So I think that's what keeps us on the gerbil wheel.
So when you're you go in the studio, you record, whether you're doing that at home or Dale in the basement. After that, you make all the decisions on packaging and everything else.
I enjoy that part, actually. I find that, so I guess that goes back to what Gary was saying about what you like to do, and I really love the whole, designing the packaging, and are you going to have a lyric, booklet, or are you going to post that online, and how do you want the thank yous to go, and what, just even fonts and stuff, that really jazzes me.
I think it's, even though I haven't done a CD of my own or anything, I know when we put the one together for the bank, it was really interesting because you're putting a persona out there, and it could come off in so many different ways, and you want it to be just right.
That was a CD that was put together for the Bank Theatre in Leamington, which is the local theatre that's currently undergoing some renovation. It's going to be done. But that was a CD that had, 20 or so people from the
There's a lot.
Essex County on it.
I think we had 19.
Yeah. So it was basically a promotional album. What about this whole issue of, CDs and vinyl versus streaming? I mean, streaming has pretty much upended everything. I get lots of questions from people. People ask me, well, how many CDs do you think I should make now? Do you have those? I imagine you go through those thoughts yourself. It's like, well, I'm making this new album. Like, for instance, the most recent one, Every Flash of Light. Did you change the way that you decided on how many units to make for that one?
I did, actually, and part of it came out of a conversation I had with Manitoba Hal. And he kind of said, that you err on the side of you do smaller runs, which was hard for me because, of course, when you go to a CD manufacturer, they'll say, well, if you do 1,000 units, it's so
price
much
drops.
The price drops. So the bargain hunter in me is
wants
really
that lower price.
That's right. But Hal said, but if you sell only 500. Then you're left with 500 CDs. There's only so much room under my bed.
That's right.
And so that is my threshold. So he said, you're better off doing a shorter run, paying more, yes, but then you also are able to pay for it with the money that you have on hand.
That's right.
Yeah. Right? And then if you run out, it's kind of a good problem to have, and then you do another short run. So that's what I did. I did a shorter run. And, and I think even though it killed me, just not getting the deal, it's not really a deal. It's not a deal if you have all that excess,
well, if you only sell
right?
half of them, then really you've doubled your cost. Like maybe you have 1,000, but you only sold 500, so it cost you double that.
And especially when people are already thinking about the next project rather than the one that's just gone under the bed.
That's right.
That's true. And we're always thinking of the next project. What I did with the first one was I had a larger run. And then when I did my second one, I said, no, I'm going to just go with the short. And it's worked out perfect. And if you look now at the manufacturing of cars, they're not putting CD players in cars anymore, the new ones. It's all going to, the USB, and it's going to Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. And so it's all changed just in a short little time.
So, it really has.
And that brings up another issue, because I know, getting back to the most recent album that you recorded with Denny Gautier, that's more of an EP length, isn't it? Like seven tracks on that one?
Yeah, that's correct.
Is that something you see going forward, that maybe you will... it's funny, because it isn't that long ago that people were trying to cram 12 or 14 tracks on an album, and that would be what they do. I've noticed that a lot of them now come in with 7 to 10 on them.
I'm not married to any number. In my head, I think I want to do a longer album next time, but really it depends on, the songs you have in hand. I want to make sure whether it's 7 or 10 or 12 that they're good songs, because I think prior to that, I had like a magic number in my head, like it's got to be more than 10. Otherwise it's not a real album. And so I think I was adding songs that were kind of filler. And so I would rather have fewer songs that are strong than to have a lot of songs that are, just okay.
And in my case, I was doing archiving, so I picked a number and it was 14. And I've done 3 albums now with 14 because I am archiving. I'm just continually putting out a record every couple of years. So I'll keep with 14 for a little bit.
Every couple of years?
I think Dale does not have writer's block. Or if he does, it's just when he's having his breakfast.
I think we've talked before about the album, people saying the album is dead, and that the way to distribute nowadays is like a song or two, and then 2-3 months later, a couple more songs. And I kind of understand that, because in the YouTube world, that's what they tell you, consistency, that you got to keep putting out. And if you don't do that, you're not top of mind anymore. And I can kind of see it. I mean, when we used to get our albums, we'd play the suckers to death, and then
that's because somebody else's, like 20, though.
Well, somebody else's new album would come out, and then we'd play that one to death, and we'd forget about the other one, So I kind of get it, but it's hard. Especially if you're doing concept stuff, it's really difficult.
Yeah. Is that a thought that you have? I mean, I know that you do stream, right? You put your albums on streaming as well. Do you think that maybe you might hold off putting a whole album out, or maybe only put half of it out and then put a bit more out? Is that something that you've thought about?
Yeah, I'm open to it, and now somebody advised me before I put this album out to not do that, and so and I think out of that, just having had this conversation, I think more and more I've concluded that there's no one way to do this. And I think consistency is important, and I think content is important. But what does that look like? It could look like releasing a series of singles. It could be releasing a number of just YouTube videos where you're playing new songs or parts of new songs or covers on your couch. I think just being top of mind, in any sense of the word, is important. But I don't think there is any one way. And there again, I think our creativity can come into play. And, how are all the different ways I can kind of sneak into people's consciousness?
And an example of that was this year, I decided to record a song when I was in Florida. And I just did it on my camera, sent it to Gary here back in Kingsville. And we created a CD of one of my, or not a CD, a video of one of my songs, and just put it out for fun. And we had 5,000 and something hits. And it was, for me, it was fun.
Right.
I'm still having fun at 63. 62, almost 3. So to me, this is a whole new world. This,
Right.
Doing a video and, self-producing it and, putting words on it, and
But
it was fun.
I think that's a really great point, because I think a lot of us have in mind we got to have this idea, and it has to be fully formed, and it has to be perfect, and it's got to have all the corners just so. And it doesn't. When you see, like you've seen, when you put stuff out online, people just they want good, but frankly, it just needs to be good enough. It doesn't have to be awesome, it has to be good enough, and real. And you're real. And I think people want real. They want, And I think we're tired of being sold things, and we're tired of all the, the flash. And I think
that's interesting. Maybe it's my own cynicism, but I actually see social media being almost the complete opposite of that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of discussion of fake news and fakery generally, but there's huge amounts of fakery on social media, and actually, promoted fakery. I mean, that unfortunately, I don't want to give marketing and promotion a bad name, but it is sold us on a lot of things that are not what we think they are.
Well, I think all the more reason when you have. I mean, we've got enough with the handful of really, really famous musical artists. We have all that. We have all the illusion and the glitz and all that. And when you have independent artists, I think because of all that, people are hungry for just someone being real, making real music and enjoying it.
Yep.
And we enjoy watching people enjoy
people who
creating.
Operate more on our levels rather than, the superstar level. Especially when you have to consider that tickets to see these people is just ridiculous.
That's true.
And, you can go see someone. A lot of times Dale's playing at places there's no charge, and or, it's a dinner theater or something, it's just more accessible and, frankly, probably more enjoyable.
But it's funny because, when I got into radio, I mean, in my previous life when I was working and doing professorial things, I didn't have time to listen to all this independent music. So, I would be, heading out to, the big store and picking up the latest CDs by, the artists that I was aware of at that time. But it was actually when I got into radio for music, I found it like mind-blowing. It's like, oh my God, there's all this really great music out there, and pretty much all of it's independent. And you couldn't put it up against these other artists. It's just they had all the, they have the, they may have great studios and everything, but a lot of it's marketing and promotion that gets you to buy that. And an awful lot of people end up in that situation, which I guess is part of the reason why I love what I do now, is that it's really exciting when you can say, oh my God, I just discovered so-and-so, and you didn't even know they existed. And, you find out it's one of the best albums that you've heard in the last year. It's pretty cool.
That's nice.
Pretty cool. Do you have any final thoughts on, one piece of advice would you give someone who was, thinking about starting out making their own recordings?
I'd say don't aim to be famous. Because that changes everything. Just
aim to be heard.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, being heard.
And not heard by everyone either, right? And just be and enjoy what you're doing. I think, right? I don't want to steal your thunder.
Love what you're doing.
But if you're and maybe actually just have an honest conversation with yourself and say, why am I doing this? And that goes back to being famous. Because if you just want to be famous, there's any number of ways to pursue that, I suppose. But if you are creating, and if you can go a little deeper with your answers, I think if you can connect with people,
I go for touching the hearts of my audience. I go for that, and the reward it's wonderful. It really is. I don't think I have ever really strive for fame or any of that stuff. I've always wanted just to be heard. You know, I have a message. I want it to be heard. That's it. Simple.
And that's probably part of the reason why, you know, you're so popular as a musician within this part of Ontario. I mean, it's because
Dale's
Dale.
music is very positive.
Yeah.
I don't think
Thank
you've
you.
ever written a negative song.
Well, we'll work on that. I'll write one tonight. And for me, in this music industry, my favorite thing now, you know, as I've gotten older, is I love to mentor. I love to help people, and we can do that, you know, through our coffee house, through shows like this, through our songs, our shows, and just try to help everybody out. You know,
There's room for everyone.
there's room for everyone.
Yeah.
Let's
I
share the
like
needs.
that. That's a nice way, nice positive way to wrap up this part of the conversation today. That, you know, it's trying to get a level of contentness when you start. You know, because often people don't have that, you know, they want more. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to go on to around the table. And
Okay.
we're going to have a few questions and have a little short discussions and maybe some fun. So the first one will be, what was your best recording experience?
Oh, that's not a fair question.
Oh, just pick one of them.
Or maybe what made it special.
Yeah.
I'm going to say with Mark Planke at Shark Tank Studios here in Windsor, we did some live off the floor. And just looking around at my bandmates with, you know, there were just cables everywhere, and we had the headphones on, and just the camaraderie. I don't know. It was pretty special. So I would say that.
Dale?
Well, you know, it's a toss-up between my very first recording because of the excitement of being in a real studio. And, you know, I had to pinch myself because I was only 16 and having the opportunity to play with some good players. But I would say probably when I did my single, that really changed my life because I worked with Bill Loop, who's a bass player from Kingsville originally, and the guys that I worked with, and we had Ray Manzarol on saxophone, and Funky Fred played percussion. Just beautiful, beautiful musicians, and we had the time of our life putting it together. And then it actually got airplay over in Europe and stuff. They sent the record off, and so that was just that little touch of, you know, it's being heard. You know, not just my family hearing it. You know, it went out there and it got heard a little bit. So that was the start. That was the spark. You know, I would say that was it.
Any bad experiences without naming names? No names.
We're not going to throw anybody under the bus.
But again, you can tell us what made it a bad experience.
Oh, golly.
We got to think on that one.
I think, oh boy, there's a couple of things that come to mind. I mean, whenever you have creative people that get together, there's always the potential for, you know,
A little friction?
a little friction, which makes it spicy. And so I would say there'd be two things. One is that, no, I'm just going to give you the one thing. The one thing, because it came from me. So if I've ever been in a bad headspace, like, or just kind of a little too self-focused and forgetting, just kind of being too self-conscious, that just, it comes through. Everything comes through. You cannot hide. You cannot hide, you know, even just your emotions and everything, because it somehow slips in and you can hear it if someone's holding back. I think that's the worst. That's been the worst for me, when I vocally hold back. And maybe if everyone can't tell, I can tell. And it's usually when I've just been too overly concerned about myself, or nervous, or, you know, impressing people, or whatever garbage like that.
And I guess when you're paying for time in the studio, that must make it worse, doesn't it?
Definitely.
What about you, Dale?
I cannot think.
That doesn't
That's
totally
so-
surprise us
so
because we are
Dale.
talking about Dale.
Bad time.
No bad experiences.
No,
He forgets the bad things.
Yeah, I guess I have probably forgotten them. I just can't think of anything that was bad other than I once played an instrument that I don't normally play, and we were able to, because I wasn't a cello player, got asked to play cello on a recording, and I said, yeah, I can do that. So I went in. I was able to do it, but I had to do it in little pieces. But when it was all done, it sounded like I played perfect. And so I guess that would have been my worst experience. I wasn't prepared to play exactly what they wanted, but I was. Once the guy said, well, let's just play 3 or 4 notes here, and then we'll tie them all together. And when it was all done, I sounded like a fabulous cello player. So that was probably my worst experience. I wasn't prepared.
But so nobody ever came and, said, oh, we're going to put synth drums on this or anything like that?
Well, they didn't want to hire you for the local symphony or anything?
No, nothing like that. I can't think of anything. I'll think of it when I'm driving home.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, next question. I'm going to ask you first because you kind of had a little preview of this question. We'll let Karen think about it a little bit. So if your house was on fire and you could only run back in and grab one thing, it wasn't a person or a pet, what would you grab?
I have a bag that has all of the lyrics I've written, 109 songs, and I always keep it in a bag and I know exactly where it is. And I have to get that because I don't have it on the computer yet. So that would be it. All my lyrics. Yeah. Because I can't remember them. I have to look at them. So that's it. That's what I would go get.
I think I would do the same. I have a bunch of journals. Now they're not all. I should probably put them in a bag just in case.
So they're ready. Yeah.
So they're ready. I have like a stack of journals, and it's journals, and then it's bits and bobs of songs. It's a mix of things.
Yeah.
But when I look back over it, I just see what's gone on in my life because I forget a lot of the bad stuff, I just see how my life has changed, how my songwriting's changed, or there's things there that I think, oh, I would like to use that now. There's just a wealth of. I've just like to dump my brain into all these books, so there's no recovery. Yes.
So see, there's two creative writers who would go for
the journals, the song journals.
What would you run back in for, Jan?
What would I run back in for? I don't know. I guess probably I would have to look through my album collection and decide which ones I couldn't possibly leave. It's funny because I recently I've been thinking, what would happen to all my music if I suddenly passed? And I'm suddenly thinking, because it's the problem is it's like, would they know that one is something that's a little rare,
right?
Versus that one that because that's it's the same with any situation like that. If somebody has built a collection of anything, whether it's books, records, or whatever, it's hoping that the people that have to sort through stuff realize that this is more important than that. So I guess I would have to go pick my music. What would you do?
Well, I'd love to run back in and maybe grab a guitar, but they're replaceable.
Yeah.
And I have a pretty rare carbon fiber bike I would like to keep, but I could buy another maybe. I have a Olympic torch from the 2010 Vancouver Olympics that I carried. So that would probably be the thing I would grab.
You could start the fire with it.
Well, I may have started the fire. I don't know. That would probably be it.
Yeah.
But then my two kids would probably fight over it because I promised one the torch and one the suit that I wore. And so now they have to fight for some.
Well, they have to be friends for the rest of their lives. We have one last question, which we ask everybody who joins us around this table. Beatles or Stones?
Oh, Beatles, 100%. 100%.
I was always a Beatles fan.
Okay, now we have to define it.
Yeah.
Early, late, or in the middle.
Early for me.
For me,
Ed Sullivan Show. I was getting my hair cut watching it in my dad's house.
I have to say, mid Beatles.
Like
Mid to
Sgt.
late.
Peppers or something in that
No, I'm going to
neighborhood?
say late. Sorry, if I can change it. Late Beatles.
In the
Late.
end.
Yes. Yeah.
I usually say mid-Beatles, and I think you are...
Yeah, I kind of like mid-Beatles. I mean, it's all good. But
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all really, really, really good. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We still haven't had anybody, and I guess there'll be people watching the show who've said Stones.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll come on your show because I'll definitely say Stones.
I definitely appreciate the Stones, but the Beatles, that Ed Sullivan show, it changed my life and
Yeah.
a lot of people's lives. So.
Yeah.
It's been great to have you join us.
Thank you.
We've got
Thank you.
few minutes left just to talk about what you're up to coming months. Karen Morand?
Well, I have a tour with Manitoba Hal, and Even the Bird Was Free. We have a week and a half where we're going to be going to Ottawa and Manitoulin Island and in and around there. And then this summer, I'm going to be doing a tour all the way to the Maritimes. I've got a bunch of shows lined up, and going to bring the little trailer and see what we can.
Nice.
Yeah, see what we can do. Yeah, it'll be fun.
And you, Dale?
Well, I've got a few things lined up. Our summer is coming, so I'm going to have Two Creeks. I'll be playing at the
Which is
Leamington
wonderful local
in Wheatley.
In Wheatley.
Yeah, Two Creeks in Wheatley.
Beautiful amphitheatre.
I've played that almost, I think, every year since it started. And then we're looking at playing at the Marina and all our local, outdoor things, as well as Dale's Friday Coffee House. And I just played in Amherstburg at the new coffee house in Amherstburg, and Windsor Folk, of course. And then there's one last thing that I wanted to say. Oh, when the Bank Theatre opens up, possibly might be putting together a John Denver tribute show to do at some point for the Bank Theatre to raise some money for our new theatre.
And Dale does great John Denver covers. And
Thank you.
I'm not just saying that because I love you.
He
and
looks
you're
a little
sitting
bit
next
like
And he
him,
does
too.
look like John Denver.
But you do.
You need the round wire rim.
You put on a masterful John Denver show. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And that's it for this edition of The Business of Music. You can find me online at folkrootsradio.com.
And you can find me online at quantumsoundproductions.ca.
Yeah. And remember, what is it you say?
Oh, subscribe, ring the bell, and you can find our podcasts there's a bell. Anywhere you can download podcasts.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you for future editions of the show.
Comments are great because maybe you'll tell us things that we haven't thought about yet. So,
yeah, and we'll see you next time.